This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 347 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 11th of August 2025. I'm Joe, and with me are Fagan.
Howdy.
Gary.
Hello.
And Kevin.
Hey.
Will and Graham are still away, so thanks a lot for sticking around, Kevin and Gary.
More than welcome.
My pleasure.
All right, something that I got a lot of messages about. Try Xfce on Wayland with openSUSE Leap 16.0 release candidate.
Hell has officially frozen over.
So I went to try this immediately and tried to boot the installer and just got a kernel panic. So that wasn't ideal. But then seemingly they updated the ISO. They must have respun it at some point because when I tried a couple of days later, it worked fine. Now, I think that this is the first easily installable Xfce desktop running on Wayland. There were ways to do it before if you kind of cobbled it together yourself. But this is the first kind of installer with a click, click, click situation. And it works pretty well, I would say.
Do you have any idea how they're doing this? Are they doing it through some sort of magic YAST technology or some such build service nonsense? Or is this something that they're pushing upstream and it's fairly generic and they've just done a lot of donkey work?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question because there was a while where I actually switched over to openSUSE for some KWin nonsense that was happening where they switched out the way that they did their tiling in KWin, and openSUSE was one of the few that didn't do that, or they kind of went their own path. So I was happy for a little bit longer because I could use i3 switched out as the manager inside of KWin. However, it turned out that they were doing it some way different from upstream, and it turned out like it ended up just making everything wrong later on. It just kind of kicked the can down the road. So it wasn't quite as great. And I'm wondering if like there's a similar situation here or how far away it is from upstream, kind of how they're doing it under the hood.
Well, my understanding is that they've basically swapped out XF Window Manager for LabWC, which is described as a Wayland window stacking compositor. So that's why things don't work 100%, basically. So, for example, my function keys, like brightness and volume, that doesn't work. You have to click manually. And a few other things are a little bit kind of dodgy. And I found no way to make Bluetooth work, for example.
I can see from the screenshot there that there's obviously some sort of horrific graphical corruption going on in the background. It's managed to turn the black to like a yellow, green, and a kind of off-green yellow sort of color. Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it?
Is wallpaper support one of the things that gets introduced with this version of Xfce? I didn't realize you had that yet.
Yeah. So this is not daily drivable as far as I'm concerned, but it is an interesting development, shall we say. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on this keenly. Let's see what happens with it.
Obviously, this is swapping out a whole component, but I wonder if what Will was saying about last week, where the developer Ariadne had that whole entire way of making it just invisible to the fact that Wayland was there and just sort of intercepting everything from it. And then maybe they don't have to change as much stuff and it might be a more sort of cleaner way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, Wayback, that's called. And that was weeks ago that we talked about that. It wasn't last week. But anyway, yeah. That, I think, is probably more promising long-term, but as always with Linux, there's like 5 ways to do everything, isn't there? Urgent help for open printing needed. So this is a thread on Mastodon from Till Campeter, where he talks about working for Canonical for nearly 20 years and recently being let go by them. And if you don't know who Till is, he is Mr. Linux printing, essentially. If you have a printer and it works on Linux, the chances are Till made that happen. And he says, with time, Canonical has grown and created internal structures as big tech, especially how employees are evaluated. With my mostly external work, I became a victim of it and they laid me off. So it sounds like they treated him a bit badly, to be honest. And it's quite disappointing to read this.
I think there's an awful lot of projects that go this way by the fact that people want to do the fancy shiny stuff, whereas, nobody wants to maintain the bridges or roads of software. And the projects like this are often the victim of it, and it's a real shame. But this is where things like foundations should step in. Dare we say the Linux Foundation, the share of useless arseholes that they are. But anyway.
Well, yeah, he's looking for sponsorship, basically a job ideally, for someone to just pay him to keep doing what he was doing. You know, he was working for Canonical, but not necessarily directly on Canonical stuff like Ubuntu and the other software they do. He was doing this open printing thing. And that used to be how things were, right? Like the big companies would hire open source developers to work on things that would benefit the company they work for, but also everyone else.
Yeah, it feels like that's sort of gotten lost somewhere in whatever performance evaluation cycle he went through, right? They were looking for contributions to Canonical maintained projects like Ubuntu or whatever it might be. And they went, oh, this guy hasn't submitted many lines of code to Ubuntu or insert Canonical project here. It's just all this printing stuff. Who cares about that? And they sort of have lost track of the fact that that's why they employed him in the first place.
You'd have to wonder, like, how many other employees of Canonical would potentially be in a similar situation, right? I imagine a major distribution or a major company like Canonical that fosters so many different distributions or derivatives of one that there'd be many people in this type of situation. They're doing upstream stuff to make those things better within their distribution, or even for Linux as a whole. I mean, that's kind of like the whole spirit of it. So I can imagine like there's probably quite a few employees that are possibly having some difficult discussions or asking about like, hey, how can I not, end up in the same boat?
Mm.
I think we should even look bigger than that, though. I think like the likes of IBM buying Red Hat, I think Red Hat had to cut about 4% of workers at the last. I remember them announcing something like that. And, what's the chances that a person will look down a spreadsheet in exactly the same way and, bin these type of things? I think we almost sort of owe it to every distribution that maybe this is exactly what a foundation for this type of thing is for. Because there's things that are just not sexy, but are absolutely vital.
Yeah, you're right. It sort of feels a little bit like a fool's errand to have for-profit companies maintaining this critical infrastructure that they build on top of, because ultimately, how do you end up with open printing not being that little tiny bit at the bottom of that XKCD comic like DNS or NTP or whatever, right? Like at some point that bit is going to fall out and then printing in Linux just breaks. And I think you're right, Phelan. Maybe some kind of foundation is the right solution to this, but they haven't been particularly good in the past either, have they?
I just hope that Till coming forward, like if Canonical then reaches back out to him and says, hey, there's this thing broken in printing. Do you think you could take a quick look at it now? That he gives him a proper answer.
Yeah, here's my day rate.
Mozilla slammed over battery-draining garbage AI in Firefox. This is a piece by Joey at OMG Ubuntu talking about the tab grouping feature. And you can turn on a thing that makes AI do it really well for you, except that Joey goes on to say that he tried it out and it was shit. What a surprise.
I mean, I don't use this particular feature in Firefox. I'm not one of these people who has 200 tabs open at a time. But this does just feel like another thing on the list of features that every time I set up a fresh Firefox profile, I'm going to have to go and disable. Like tab groups, translation, AI suggestions in the search bar. There's a whole bunch of this stuff now that every single time I set up a new machine, I have to go and turn back off.
Yeah, I'm probably in the target demographic for people that do have a lot of tabs. I regularly have probably 100, 200. However, I have never once needed or considered having AI group my tabs for me. That's never something I've wanted, let alone whether or not it costs CPU. But I do agree, like it feels like one of those other things like, hey, here's a cool idea. We could have AI do something for us that is possibly not necessary. And now I have to like watch out for some of those things. In fact, actually, even when I first saw the article, I saw Mozilla slammed over ... in Firefox. And I was like, oh, it's Tuesday. Great. Like that wasn't super shocking to me. But then to find out it's like AI related and tab grouping, to me, I don't know. This it just seems like I'm in crazy town.
I mean, how the hell do they know how I want my tabs organized? Like organizing stuff feels like something I want to do myself.
Yeah, that'd be like if someone came into your house and reorganized all your books into different shelves and you went looking for the book and you're like, where is this book? Like, I guess there's some search features or something, but that just seems like something, having somebody organized for me is not necessarily what I would want, let alone a faceless AI.
Well, it's AI, so now your underpants are in the kitchen drawer because that made sense at the time.
I'm breathing this in. I'm loving it. Ah. Turned out I went hacking about inside my About config a few months back when they were talking about ML this and blah, blah, blah. And anything I found with ML, I was like, fucking Boolean to false, you fucker. And it turns out that I don't have this. So I did almost accidentally get a grouped tab to happen by dragging one over another. That's not what I wanted it to do. I just wanted to move a tab in sequence. But yeah. How the fuck do you think I want to organize my tabs? It's the most obscene thing. Well, it was just guess by random word assortment or whatever. Like, shite. Absolute shite.
Well, Joey talks about it in the article. He tested it out and he had some shopping tabs open and it suggested outdoor cooking.
Good.
But the problem is that the tabs were about tech items and skate t-shirts. So completely fucking wrong as usual.
I'm just wondering, like, if you're at the level of once it's grouped, you're probably going to have to search for it to find out what group anyway. But if you're already at the level of search, like, it doesn't matter if they're organized into groups or not. So you're still just searching for the tab.
I occasionally end up grouping stuff by dragging tabs around, and I just find it really annoying. Like, tab groups can just fuck off, and AI-powered tab groups can get fucked, quite frankly.
Tabs should just be in the order I opened them in.
No. You're all wrong there. Tab groups are actually really good. Use Simple Tab Group. It's extra plugin, a third-party one you can stick in, and I use it for base by client and base by project, and I have lots of them, and I have many hundreds of tabs, but I can just, they turn off in the background, so it's not hoovering up CPU usage when you're not looking at them, and you can also box things away. Like I've got a late night Linux one, for instance, where I shove news articles or whatever we're doing. It's really good. But no, I don't need anybody to sort that for me, thanks.
I love tab groups. I have massive groups, but it's also not that hard for me to make them myself. So that's what I'm not saying here is like whenever I want the group of, you know, like Phelan said, by client or whatever it is, even by research topic, I can do that really quickly. It's not something I needed a robot to do.
I feel like your use for tab groups is just my use for new window.
Oh, no, I could not have. If I did that, I would probably have like 50 windows open, and that would be a whole different set of problems.
It'd be like the old Internet Explorer days.
Gary should be taken away from his computer.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/LNL. Tailscale is the easiest way to connect devices and services to each other, wherever they are. Tailscale gives you secure remote access to any resource anywhere in the world. Whether that's databases, servers, Kubernetes, on-prem boxes, virtual private clouds, desktop PCs, 3D printers, or offsite backups in your friend's garage. Connect anything and everything you want, wherever it is, and get started in minutes. Tailscale's personal plan will always be free, and you get up to 100 devices and 3 users for free with no credit card required. So support the show and go to tailscale.com/LNL and try Tailscale out today. Or if you want to use Tailscale at an industrial scale, with more users and devices, or take advantage of features like MDM policies, auditing, network flow logging, and priority support, try it out at work using the code Linux25. You'll get 3 free months of any Tailscale paid plan, and you can find out why thousands of companies like Instacart, Hugging Face, and Duolingo have switched to Tailscale. That's code Linux25. 2 seemingly unrelated stories made me think about something recently. So Asahi put up their progress report for Linux 6.16. And then there's a couple of Phoronix stories. Intel CPU temperature monitoring driver for Linux now unmaintained after layoffs. And also additional Intel Linux drivers left orphaned and maintainers let go. And this got me into a bit of a spiral, to be honest, because if you look at Asahi, for those who don't know or remember, that is the project to get Linux working natively on Apple Silicon Macs. And the project has had a bit of strife, shall we say. Hector Martin, the lead developer, left. So it's kind of been ticking along somewhat in maintenance mode, although actually this progress report was a bit surprising to me. They have been making more progress with the graphics stuff and whatnot, but they've only enabled it to work on the M1 and M2 series Macs and not the M3 and M4. Through no fault of their own, It's a small project. It's a very difficult thing that they're doing, and they've already done way more than I thought they would do. And then I look at Intel. They've laid off people who are maintaining drivers, and Intel is just not doing very well. And I feel like we're moving towards a future that won't even be that long from now, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe even less than that, where you will not be able to buy an x86 computer anymore. You won't be able to go into a shop or even potentially have some specialist sellers because Intel and AMD won't be making the chips. I don't think Intel will be around, and AMD will probably just be making graphics cards and maybe will have pivoted to ARM. And when we get to that point, I think that the data center will be fine because there's standards there. But for client machines, desktops, laptops, I don't think you will be able to buy a new x86 laptop. And at that point, desktop Linux is just fucked. Am I just panicking here unnecessarily or what?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll adapt in the same way that the Linux desktop always has, right? There have been periods where things like drivers have not been stellar and that there has been instability, but we've always gotten through it. And I see no reason that, given time, those standards won't either be there for ARM CPUs on the Linux desktop, or we won't come up with some kind of widely accepted workaround.
I mean, outside of the sticking with Varial stuff, see the i386 news about Debian 13. Outside of sticking with the old things like that, desktop Linux does move forward when forced to. And if x86 processors are no longer around, or you just cannot easily buy them, I have no doubt that the Linux community as a whole, be it all the different distros and things, will move forward into making whatever the CPU architecture is of the day work about as good as it does today. It may take a little bit more time to get it up to the same level as today, but I have no doubt that the majority of effort will switch once we do hit that kind of a timeline.
But I can walk into Curry's here, Best Buy in America, whatever, an electronics shop, and buy a fairly cheap laptop, and I can install and run Linux on it, and it's basically going to work. There might be a few quirks here and there, but generally speaking, that is going to work. When you can only buy ARM-based laptops, I just can't see that being the case because it takes specific effort per device to get Linux to work properly on it.
I think you're right with that, but I also think most software providers are not going to live with that for too long because I think they'll also get fed up. And I think there'll be a move to say, laptop level 2037 and server edition 35 is now out. Much like has happened a little bit with the RISC-V. We had a news article, I don't know, was it 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, where the various distros, Ubuntu included, said, oh yeah, from now on, we're no longer going to support RISC-V. It needs to be the BLA spec, which actually isn't fully out yet, but they were saying already that, the next LTS is not going to, it's not going to be supported past 2024. You're going to have to move to the 2026 one. I think something like that will happen because phones are a pain in the arse, but a phone is an expensive single device that people are going to buy. People don't want to be changing a laptop or a desktop that quick. I think that'll standardize to a certain level. You'll have a fixed period of no churn for the components on a board or the processor that's on there or the SoC or whatever way they happen to do it in the future is. I just think, overall, it doesn't make sense for anybody to race like that. And not even the likes of Microsoft likes handling multiple hardware builds. Like, for so many years, they literally were x86 and Alpha. Was that the shit back in NT days? It was like, I don't know who made them do that, but that's what they did. And they're not going to want to compete on all those levels because it's wasted effort.
And then you also have things like Apple's Rosetta 2, which I think they actually just discontinued support for. But that just shows that, it's possible to have these translation layers. So something like that could be developed for Linux as well, barring, money and funding developers to do so. But technically, it's feasible. And at least with Rosetta, the performance was actually surprisingly good. So I would imagine the same sort of thing could potentially happen if we were all forced to move to ARM or something else.
Well, I was really surprised when I set up a Windows 11 ARM VM on an M1 Mac. and I installed a copy of Macromedia Fireworks 2004 on an ARM Windows 11 VM, and it just worked. And that's like a 20-odd-year-old piece of software running in a VM on an ARM machine.
This sounds like a challenge that you had to do for the podcast.
And was it a quad-core duo something that doesn't make any sense machine?
No, this was an M1 Mac Mini with VMware Fusion running on it, and the Windows 11 ARM ISO that I just downloaded from Microsoft. Like, it was genuinely surprising, the level of backwards support that could be done when you really, really wanted to. And I guess on the server side with ARM, you've got things like Server Ready, which gives a standardized way to boot the machine, write drivers, all that kind of stuff. So I guess what you're asking for, Joe, is there going to be an ARM laptop ready at some point in the next 5 years, right?
Yeah. But I just don't think the financial incentive is there, because you've got all these cloud providers that want to run ARM CPUs. And so the industry got together and made ARM server ready. But like, there's just not that incentive on client machines, because client machines don't run Linux out of the box, generally speaking.
But there's also not that many ARM laptops yet. Like, I was in PC World the other day, and there were maybe one or two different models of ARM laptop that weren't Chromebooks, and maybe 30 or 40 x86 laptops. And it's a similar story in Best Buy and a lot of other retailers. They're just not widespread enough yet for it to be a problem, I guess.
And so you're saying that once they are widespread enough, the Linux community will get together and sort it out?
Well, I think it's like Phelim said. Microsoft or the manufacturers aren't going to want to keep building a separate Windows image or a separate complete set of drivers or boot processes for every single machine that they ship. And likewise, I just don't think it's going to happen from a repairability point of view. If I'm unable to just go and download a Windows 11 ARM ISO from the Microsoft website, throw it on a machine to reinstall the operating system when the SSD inevitably dies or the Windows install messes up for the 15th time this year, then I just don't think that's something that consumers or regulators are going to accept. I think we have to get to a point where there is a ARM laptop ready, and then that's the standard that we adopt as the Linux community going forward. And we just buy the machines that are ARM laptop ready, in the same way that 10 years ago you wouldn't have bought a machine with an NVIDIA graphics card.
I really, really hope you're all right.
I worry more about AMD becoming like the next Intel, where there's just no other competitor to it in the x86 realm, and it just kind of plateaus. That, I think, is a more realistic near-term worry.
Yeah. Although the high-end AMD stuff now is really powerful, so it wouldn't matter if it plateaued for a little bit. But I suppose ARM isn't plateauing, is it? So, yeah, maybe that is a genuine worry, because, Intel just seems to be just dead in the water, doesn't it, at this point?
It also depends on how much we can move all of our current workloads to more parallel processes where ARM like really shines and x86 does worse. And I think that's a paradigm shift at the software level. So we're going to have to start building things that are better able to take advantage of hundreds of cores. And once I think we can do that better, there will be more incentive to go more towards ARM, less away from x86. But we're talking like a long time, I think, at this point. I don't think we're anywhere near being able to do that.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Entroware. Go to entroware.com. Entroware sells laptops, desktops, and servers with Ubuntu pre-installed. Most parts are configurable, so you can pick the CPU, RAM, and storage that's right for you. If you can't find exactly what you're looking for, then do contact them and they'll work with you on a bespoke solution that's perfect for your needs. They ship to the UK, Republic of Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And if you do buy one of their machines, there's a little drop down at checkout where you can select Late Night Linux so they'll know that we sent you. So go to entroware.com for all your Linux computing needs. Let's do some discoveries then. Kevin, Just.
Yeah, Just is a modern replacement for something like Make, or at least how people use Make frequently, as in kind of like a task runner. So not necessarily as a build tool to compile different things, but like I want to do something. I want to stand up a web server, or I want to clean all my artifacts, or whatever it is. People use Make that way. Just is built from the ground up as a command runner, And it has a lot of handy features because it was built from the ground up. It also likes to shed a lot of the odd idiosyncrasies of Make so that it is more friendly both to read, both to write, and also much more flexible. We've switched a lot of projects over from using Make to Just in several companies that I've worked at, and it's been a pretty awesome experience all the way around. Plus, the developer is super friendly, takes a lot of feedback, incorporates new features and bug fixes all the time. Great developer, so highly worth checking out.
Oh no, what's this? Languages, Rust 98.5%. Of course it's written in Rust.
I mean, it's a pick from me, so you should have just assumed that.
How do I update all my Rust packages? Help.
Actually, there's a cargo update for that.
Oh, well, I tried to cargo update and then it told me that something didn't match and it didn't work properly and all cargo broke is what it fucking did.
There is a third-party cargo plugin called Cargo Install Update that will look at all of your Rust installed binaries, not related to the Rust language, but just binaries that happen to be written in Rust, and will update all of them. So Cargo Install Update.
Send me the link. Maybe I shall find this for the next episode because it's a shit show.
In fact, put it in the doc because I'm sure loads of people would like that. Phelim, ADSB weather model.
Somebody, and actually it turns out it's like years ago, this is actually old, but the stuff I use to pick up airplanes, the ADSB, there is a weather component in that, or rather a wind component in that. This guy read a paper where somebody said that you could use that data across multiple aircraft, across multiple hours, to then use that as a wind calculation as part of enhancing weather forecasting. So there is a cool project. You can download it, run it. Its install is pretty simple. Just set up a Python environment and then install the various bits. And then, yes, you can locally pick up information from your own receiver if you've got one, or you can get historical data and do the same thing. And then you can actually detect wind sort of changes as they go from the aircraft as they're flying. Because as an airplane flies, it has a pointing direction where it wants to go, and it has to adjust that based on whatever the wind that it picks up from instruments, and therefore they adjust the track. So don't quote me on how to actually do this properly, but yes, that is how you say, well, this minus that equals the wind direction adjustment. And using loads of different airplanes, you can actually get a fair prediction, like using the windy webpage where you can see the animated graphics of where winds are going around an area. And yeah, you can do that the same way and get the same sort of information. I did it. It did produce some graphs, but unfortunately they are overplaced across the top of the Netherlands because that is the maps that the guy gave. And I didn't actually find a way to put proper maps there. And he said they were for the EU and didn't include Ireland. And I say, screw you, you Dutch wanker. Anyway.
Well, I was going to say, just look at windy.com. It's much easier.
You could, but this is actual extra information. And to be quite honest, a lot of the Met offices around the world are actually starting to use people's home weather stations. Now, they don't obviously claim that they are as good as the stuff that they would put out on one of their sites, but they are sort of a way to get sort of very localized statistical models, maybe the best way to look at it, where you're not saying, I know that your thermometer is balanced and measured to X Celsius plus or minus, but if you see all of the weather stations locally that are of the same sort of type and they all sort of same go in that sort of direction, then you have a fair idea how it goes. And I think they're using a lot of these type of extra information to sort of feed into their own models because, well, they're literally everywhere. And, if you've got a temperature sensor every couple of kilometers and then you've got an airplane that's flying at various altitudes throughout the airway in a box square around the whole country, then, yeah, extra info is more data, more calculations, more maybe accurate weather forecasts. Who knows?
Gary, Copy Party. I keep hearing about this. Everyone's obsessed with it.
Yes. So the point of Copy Party is that you can turn almost any device into a file server and access the files from almost any web browser.
Stop it.
So this is really useful for me with the aforementioned Pentium 3 machines, where I have a machine, for example, which can only run Python 2, and it's probably worth stating at this point that Copy Party, yes, is written in Python, works in any machine with Python 2.7 or Python 3. It is a single Python file. You execute it, and it is a web server that serves files, essentially. So works with HTTP, WebDAV, FTP, TFTP, SMB, and there's even an Android app and an iPhone shortcut for it. But this is a single Python file that is quite possibly the best file server I've ever seen. So nice web UI to view files in. It can do thumbnails. It can do video playback, including transcoding. And you can access the file server in any browser made as far back as I can tell to like Windows 3.1. And it just kind of works. So really cool project that someone has just built it to scratch an itch, do a bunch of cool stuff. Worth checking out.
Boo.
Don't be so negative, Phelim. What's your problem?
No, I am absolutely going to be negative. I had to, one of the guys that I work for, hi Luca, said, "Oh, have you seen this?" And I went, "I swear to God, if you mention that to any of the people in management, for a start, it is not a proper fucking file server. It might be nice sharing around your house, but it is not a proper file server. And it doesn't do proper SMB. And they even say it doesn't do that. And, oh, why would you need SMB? Because everybody uses AD in a network. Just stop these projects."
Hey, I never said it was a proper file server.
It's just Python-m http.server is what that fucking is. It's the fucking Python inbuilt file server.
Which I use all the time on my network.
Yes, it is. It's very handy for things that aren't real.
But now imagine that you could do Python-m HTTP server, Joe, and transcode a video to another machine in your house, for example.
Just stop. Stop encouraging this nonsense.
No, look, this isn't something I would use in a proper business environment, clearly, but as a cool project to go and share some files around my house or watch a video on a machine that otherwise wouldn't be able to, or view a bunch of previews of thumbnails of photos that are in a folder on a box that doesn't have Samba installed, I think it's pretty useful.
Resigned sigh.
Right, well, we better get out of here. Thank you once again, Gary and Kevin, for joining us. It's been great. We'll be back next week when hopefully normal service will be resumed. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelim.
I've been Gary.
And I've been Kevin.
See you later.